been sold the idea that financial independence is all about some number on your account statement, or even worse, that you don't qualify because of where you started out. That's just not true. It's not about some well-kept secret of the wealthy. It's about finding the right information and knowing how to apply it. On the Get Ready for the Future show, we're answering your questions so you can start making real financial change today. The journey to true financial independence begins right here, and it starts with you.
Coming to you from the 6th floor of 3 Financial Center in West Little Rock, Arkansas, this is the Get Ready for the Future show. I'm Scott Inman, along with me today, Tim Key, out of the Little Rock office, as we get set to answer your questions about money, investing, the election coming up in our question and answers today, retirement. Nothing is off base. We want you to get your questions to us, and we will answer them on the air. And everything we do here on the show and at Gen Wealth Financial Advisors is always about helping people discover, protect, and share true financial independence. So that's the vantage point that we come at when we answer the questions, and everything is about that. Tim, you ready to dive in?
Let's dive in.
All right, we'll get rolling with our first question. Chriselle from Little Rock writes, which sectors do you believe will be most impacted by the election results, and should I adjust my investments in those areas? Boy, everybody is thinking about the election. Chriselle, thanks. You're probably just voicing what a lot of people have on their minds right now. You got a presidential election in about 2 weeks from the time frame that we're sitting here recording the Get Ready for the Future show today. And I think we need to walk through this because there are potentially, depending on the results of the election, some sectors of the economy that might perform better under a Democratic administration or a Democratic-led government, and there might be some sectors that are better under Republican-led president or a Republican-led government. And I think those two differences are one place we should highlight here, Tim, because the president is not the only thing that matters here. It is who controls Congress. And I think the general consensus is right now, although we do all have to go vote, is the presidential election is a 50-50 toss-up. We don't know whether it'll be a Republican or a Democrat in office, but it is pretty likely that the Republicans will control one piece of Congress and the Democrats might control the other. So we're probably going to have a split government. So radical change that impacts the economy and corporations and thereby stock is not really, I don't think, on the table.
It's very unlikely. The market likes a split Congress or a Congress of one party and the president of another because, again, it's gridlock and there's not much that can just get pushed through at that point. So the market tends to favor a split Congress or the president, and when that happens, traditionally, historically speaking, we've had better market results during those periods of time rather than having one party in total control, whether it be Republican or Democrat.
Yeah, so let's talk about some sectors that may potentially, and again, these are not investment recommendations at all because there's a huge potential, a huge emphasis on the word potential here. But under Republican-led leadership, you might look at things like healthcare. You might look at things like oil and gas, the defensive sector, because money's going to be spent on defense, and that also works well if the economy is not doing well typically. On the Democratic side, maybe green energy is a sector that might be propped up under a Democratic-led government. And infrastructure, there's going to be likely some spending in the infrastructure realm by the government as well. But this is all, I think, to point out and bring it back to Chriselle's question, should I adjust my investments in those areas? No, I don't think you should, because at this point we're telling you potential. We're telling you about opportunity where focus might be based on the leadership, but it's all speculative and dependent upon legislative change. And I don't think, Tim, anyone should ever create an investment strategy based on the outcome of an election.
No, and it's probably never good to totally get out of certain sectors at really any time, because as the market rotates through its cycle, all sectors are going to have its moment. And so if you completely pull out just because you anticipate that maybe a Democrat's going to get elected, then you are potentially missing out just based on the historical aspect of things that we all need gas, and that's not going to go away even if a Democrat comes in and says they're going completely electric in 10 years or whatever that case may be. So we need to make sure that we continue to stay diversified in our portfolio. We need to make sure we continue to stay in the market. But we do have some things potentially that you might, as you get into the retirement red zone, start pulling back on some of the risk you are taking in your overall portfolio.
Yeah, I think here's what matters the most to me when I think about, where things might be in the future is what matters most or more than who is president and who controls Congress is the overall economy. Now, certainly legislation can impact that, but the overall economy is what matters. And where we are in the economic cycle right now is a declining interest rate environment. In mid-September, the Federal Reserve cut interest rates by 0.5 point. They are expected to, again, no guarantees, but they are expected to have more cuts coming by the end of the year. So when you think about election results, I would focus more on what happens after interest rate cuts. And we've got a graphic here. It's going to be kind of busy for our video audience, but we're going to walk through it. This is from LPL Research, sector relative performance versus the S&P 500 6 months after an initial rate cut. So let me break that down in English for you. It's comparing the performance of certain sectors of the economy to the S&P 500 in a 6-month time frame after an initial interest rate cut. And we've got 4 of them, the last 4. So we had a cut in 2019, 2007, 2001, and 1995. So those are the 4 most recent rate cut cycles and the date of the very first cut. So you can see there, healthcare did pretty well in 95. Communication services did very well. Consumer staples, financials were up. Things that didn't do as well were consumer discretionary materials and information technology. But that was 1995, Tim, and if you take that across the board, it looks different every time that we compare a different rate cut cycle. And I think it's important, and it sticks out in my mind, what was happening in 2001. Well, we hadn't had 9/11 yet. It was 1/3 of 2001. But 6 months after, we were getting very close. And then the economy, we were at war, so the economy was struggling there. Terrorism was taking hold. And then you look at 9/18 of 2007, and that was at the beginning of really what was considered the beginning of the great financial crisis, which would happen a year later.
Right. And really, if you look across the board here, there's not really one sector that just completely outperforms all the others when rates are starting to be cut, except utilities. And those all 4 times, utilities have had positive returns. But as utilities normally do, they don't just knock it out of the ballpark. But it's nice and steady. You got pretty good, decent dividends off of the utilities. They're pretty stable because, again, we're all going to use electricity and gas and different things like that. But it is hard to time the sectors, even in the down, rate cutting environment, because we don't know exactly what's going to happen next. There's whether it's September 11th, 2001, or whether it's the great financial crisis, whatever that might be. COVID came in not too long after August of 2019. Yep. So there's always other things that temporarily drive the market. Again, for the long term, it's staying invested, staying diversified, and being able to really control where your money is and not really worrying about it until you get closer to retirement.
Yeah, and we don't know how old Chriselle is, so when we start talking about adjusting investments, Chriselle, the decisions about investment strategy should be more about your economy as opposed to the economy. And what is your economy? Well, what are the variables or the factors that need to be considered when determining your investment strategy? The first one is age. How close are you to needing to use some of your investments? And that is really kind of basically dovetails into the next one, the time horizon until retirement. So if, Chriselle, you're 40, then really we're not talking about what sector. We're really talking about more of an asset allocation. Do you need more growth, or do you need some more stability from something like bonds, which do tend to perform very well when interest rates are being cut? So when you look at that, your age, your time horizon, your contribution rate, because here's something that matters more, and people have a hard time grasping this, but we tell our clients all the time, your contribution rate matters more than your overall rate of return. So to get focused on tweaking your investments because of elections, because of the economy, for a short time and then changing it again, trying to get that extra rate of return, really it could cause you to chase a rate of return and maybe take too much risk and not get what you're wanting to from a rate of return standpoint. So we look more at the contribution rate first. If you can assign a conservative rate of return over a long period of time and use your contribution rate to see where you're going to be at the end of your work life when your time horizon is met, when retirement is there. That's the planning process that we need to take into consideration. And then the other thing, and Tim, you've already talked about it, is staying invested and basically being in it for the long haul.
Yeah, it's really the long haul. And we go back to contribution rates. If you're not contributing anything, it's not going to really make a difference, is it? So
Yeah.
I've got a friend who likes to say if he can, put $100 in every month, even if the market goes down 15%, he's got $85 that's still invested. So it is the contribution rate, making sure you're allocated properly, like Scott said, that asset allocation. And that really helps with the emotions of things too, knowing that you don't have all of your eggs in one basket. So that's the overall gist of really where we need to be. But again, it goes back to your age and your time horizon.
And I know that Chrishell's not alone. A lot of you listening or watching may be concerned about what the election results are going to do for the economy and thereby your investments. And we have a great upcoming event that we want to encourage you to register for. We're going to be talking about the election and the economy coming up on October 29th at the Chenal Event Venue. That's in West Little Rock, Arkansas. 6:30 is the start time, and we need you to register if you're interested in coming. It's free to attend, but you can go to getreadyforthefuture.com/academy to reserve your seat. There are also at that address a list of other events that we have coming your way. But if you're particularly concerned about the election, I want to encourage you to sign up for that. Seats are limited. We'll be serving food, so we need to know who's coming, but it is free to attend. Getreadyforthefuture.com/academy and find out about, does the election really matter when it comes to the stock market and the economy? Next on the Get Ready for the Future show, we've got a text from Lane. I'm 55 and I've got about $450,000 in retirement assets so far. What steps should I take now to ensure a comfortable retirement at 64? Lane, thanks for the question. So we got about a 9-year time horizon. One of the things you can do, first of all, we would say build an overall plan, but if you're not ready to take that next step, save more. Take a look at your contribution rates. We just said a moment ago that the contribution rate matters more than the overall rate of return. Lane, what are you putting into that to grow that $450,000 by retirement? You've got 9 years, you're over 50, so you can max out your employer plan if you have one. We don't know that either. He says it's in retirement assets, but if it's in, let's say, a 401k, you now are eligible for catch-up contributions to your 401k. So are you doing that? Your 401k limits $23,000 annually, but you at age 50 have an opportunity for $7,500 in catch-up contributions, which puts you at $30,500 that you can get out of your own money into your 401k, plus a potential employer match. So if you're not doing that, Lane, I would suggest that's the first place I would go is, can you afford to put more money into your 401k?
Yeah, I just hit that magic number of 55 last week. So this one kind of, it's
personal, huh?
It is personal. So
you're not leaving me at 64, though,
I'm not planning on leaving at 64.
All right.
And that's another thing, why 64 for Lane too? The magic number for a lot of folks, I mean, the earlier the better for some, but 65 is what a lot of folks target just because of being able to be eligible for Medicare. But at 55, depending on, what's going on in the household, I mean, I still have a senior in college and then a junior in high school, so we still got kids on the payroll. But a lot of folks are in their highest income earning years. The most you're probably making more than you've ever made in your early to mid 50s, and that's probably going to continue on until retirement at that point. But also, a lot of your expenses have gone down because maybe the kids are out of the house and things like that. So being able to max out your employer retirement plan and do that catch up, it's very feasible for a lot of folks at the age of 55. And you are kind of playing catch up more than likely, because if you had kids, kids are expensive and you probably haven't been able to max it out up to that point. So being able to really hammer away at it and put that $30,500, that's the contribution limits for 2024. The new limits will probably come out in the next few weeks for 2025. The IRS does adjust those on an annual basis. But being able to do that now through retirement, whether that's age 64, we'd be able to put a plan together, make sure that the asset number that we're trying to reach to be able to produce the monthly income that you'll need, Lane, is something that we can definitely do for you in the plan that we would put together for you, which would also take into consideration Social Security and any pension benefits that you might have.
Yeah, and the investment strategy, I think, Lane, needs to change. If you're truly 9 years out away from retirement, you're in the retirement red zone, as we call it, and it's that 10-year and less mark that we really start to tweak that investment strategy. And the reason being is when you do enter retirement and you start selling some investments to utilize as income, you don't want the money that you are selling, or the investments that you are selling for income today, to be subject to market risk. That's called sequence risk. If you're selling from investments that are going down in value, that can cause a rapid depletion of what you have saved for retirement. So we've kind of focused on, hey, if you've got $450,000, you need to be growing those assets. You need to be saving and still accumulating. But at the same time, with a portion of your investment strategy, you need to be preparing a bucket of money for distribution at age 64. And that bucket doesn't need to be full-on aggressive in the stock market. It is a bucketing strategy that we employ here at GenWealth that basically takes the conservative investments that for use now, the less conservative investments for a later time frame, and the growth investments for the longest time frame. You're always going to need growth, even in retirement, but you don't need all growth, and you don't need all growth now. So building that plan, a retirement income plan, will help create the investment strategy you need to tweak it as you enter the retirement red zone. And another thing, too, I would say is to consider health care. You say 64, that's going to leave you a small gap until you reach Medicare age. You're eligible at age 65. Now, it is a very small gap, so it's possible that your employer may offer a COBRA policy so that you can extend health insurance past your retirement date for a few months. Usually it's about 18 months, but a plan for health care for that gap until you get to Medicare, and then making sure you have a plan for health care moving forward, Tim, because one of the things we always have to tell clients is that some are not aware, some are, is that Medicare will cover a lot of health care needs, but it will not cover all of them.
Exactly. And so Medicare doesn't cover a lot of the things people actually expect it to, which would be kind of a long-term care event where you might be need either in-house nursing or even going into a nursing home. So one of the aspects that we would look at there would be maybe a long-term care insurance policy, whether that's a hybrid life insurance with long-term care or just a straight long-term care policy. You're at 55. That 55 to age 60 is kind of the sweet spot for that premium. And if you get it much before then, you're probably paying premiums for much longer than you need to. The policies really have increased premiums after 60 because, again, you're just closer to the time that you're going to need it. So in that 55, we've had some clients come in recently that were age 55. And the premiums, even though they're still a bit high, they were much more affordable than a lot of them that we've seen in the past with folks that are closer to that 60 years old mark.
Yeah,
so,
he's in the window, right?
He's right there.
His window of the sweet spot has just opened up, and that's why it's even more imperative that he builds a retirement income plan, not just because he's in the retirement red zone from an income and investment standpoint, but really in the long-term care red zone, right? Decisions need to be made, and I would say this too, when we talk about using insurance as a leverage for long-term care coverage, it's not made. That decision should not be and is not made at GenWealth in a vacuum. It needs to be incorporated into your overall retirement income plan, meaning that once you know what you're going to live on in retirement, you'll know that, do I have excess assets? I don't need all of my savings to create the income that I want in retirement. And if that's the case, we can peel off a bucket of money and invest that moderately, and that is your long-term care bucket. We would call that self-insuring. However, if you look at the income plan and you need most of your assets to produce that for you, to live the retirement you want, maybe part of that monthly income can be used to pay a premium on a long-term care insurance policy. So it can all be set up through the planning process. But again, back to the point of the plan lets us understand better what a client's needs are.
Yeah, we don't know for sure if Lane's married or not, and what that situation may look like, and it's single versus married. There's a lot of different aspects that go into that, because if it's someone that's single, what they've been using to keep their household going, now if they're in a nursing home, maybe the house is sold and things like that, and you're able to use that income to actually take care of the expenses of the nursing home or whatever that situation may look like. It kind of goes back to, we don't want to become a burden to our kids.
Yeah.
And so if that's one of your goals in retirement, is not to become a burden, then we need to make sure that we have the right things in place to make sure that the money that you need on a monthly basis is there, whatever the situation might be.
Yeah, Lane's asking a question that's very common in our meeting room. He's telling us how much he has, and he wants to know, is that going to be enough? And he's wondering what steps should he take to ensure a comfortable retirement. If those are questions you'd like answers to, I would encourage you to walk through the GenWealth Ready to Retire process. It's real easy to get started. You can call us toll-free, 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526. Or send us an email, show@getreadyforthefuture.com, and set up a first appointment with a GenWealth advisor near you. We've got offices all over the state of Arkansas, in Conway, here in Little Rock, Bryant, El Dorado, and Hot Springs. We're also in Bossier City, Louisiana. So somewhere near you, an advisor is ready to sit down with you, and that first appointment is complimentary. Doesn't cost anything. It's just a discussion about your goals and what you'd like to accomplish, and if we can be a match for you. We'd love to work with you. So again, the GenWealth Ready to Retire process, toll-free 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526. And this is the question of the week. Because it is so common, we're going to give Lane a free Get Ready for the Future Show tumbler for being the question of the week. Lane, if you'll email us to claim it, we'll get it to you. Next, Damon from Little Rock. I'm considering getting into real estate via rental properties. I'm currently 45 with about $300,000 in retirement accounts, $130,000 left to pay on my primary mortgage, and only about $2,000 in other debt. Would you recommend I pay off debt before getting into rentals? What else should I be aware of over the next few years as I get closer to what y'all call the retirement red zone? Damon is definitely from Little Rock. Y'all call it, right? Hey, so the first thing that stands out to me here, Tim, is that Damon's given us a lot of detail about his retirement savings, how much he has left on his primary mortgage, how much he has little in other debt. What he doesn't tell us is what money does he have to put down on this rental property.
Right. Where's that money coming from that's going to actually make that purchase of that rental property? We don't want to leverage ourselves so much in rental properties, especially if you're only going to have one, because there can be so much that goes wrong with having just one property, and that goes for even if you have cash to pay for it.
Yep.
If you don't have a renter in there, or if you did have a bad renter and they tear up the place, then you're going to have a lot of cost and a period of time that you won't have any income coming in there. So lots of things to consider when going into rental properties. We don't know if it's going to be a long-term renter versus a short-term renter, what that's going to look like and what the plans are there. Lots of people do Airbnbs and VRBOs and things like that now, which have some advantages to it, but also based on location, it might be better to have a long-term renter in there, especially if you get the right one. We've known many clients that have had rental properties that have had renters for years and years that have been very stable income-producing tenants for them. So lots of factors that go into play here, but one of the big ones that we're missing out of this summary here at the beginning is, where is he going to come up with the money to actually buy that real estate property?
Yeah, and what I'm concerned that I'm hearing here is maybe he's considering tapping the retirement savings, and we would not recommend doing that. We do not want to take it from retirement savings. So do you have the capital to put a big enough down payment on the rental purchase so that your realistic rental income that you will receive will not only pay the mortgage, but you also have to think about all the other expenses of the home, which include taxes, insurance, potentially utilities. If you had a short-term renter, you're going to be paying that. If you have a long-term renter, you may not. They may be able to pay the utilities. But you have to figure out a business plan, basically, to determine could you realistically get enough income that the cash flow is going to take care of your expenses. Because here, and this is my personal experience with rental properties. We do have a short-term rental. And when I went into it, my mindset was such that if we never rented it, if it did not rent, well, maybe I shouldn't say never rent it, but if any given month we did not rent the property, could I stand the paying of the expenses, all those expenses we just mentioned, the mortgage, the insurance, the utilities, keeping the lights on? Could I withstand that from my cash flow with no detriment to my lifestyle? And I wanted to check that box before I went in, because it was kind of a worst case scenario situation, Tim, as I was thinking, okay, if we don't ever rent this thing, am I going to be able to sustain it? So that's not for everybody. That's just my opinion. If you're really going, I wasn't going at it from necessarily a business perspective. I was just going at it as we were looking at a property to have that we could use, but also have other people rent and use that rental income to pay the bills. So that was my process. Yours may be a little different, but I do think you want to be real conservative going into that first one.
Yeah, I'd be very conservative. It's just my nature, my means anyway. But I would want to make sure that if everything went wrong with this, what's it going to do to my finances, both short-term and long-term? What kind of bind is it going to put me in? So, for long-term rentals for income in retirement, we've had some clients that have come in that have had very nice monthly income coming from rental properties, and it's pretty stable. They've got a number of properties. If one property is struggling, the other ones are able to pick it up. I think that's where you want to get to. And it's not the easiest process to go from, one property to 10 properties or whatever that looks like, but it can be very good income in retirement if done right. Yeah. So again, it needs to come back to the overall financial plan. What's the income they're going to look like going along with your retirement assets that you've built up? You're young enough now at 45 that we don't want to touch the retirement accounts, because not only would we be paying ordinary income taxes, but we'd also have a 10% penalty. So almost half of that would be gone if we tried to pull that out and use that money for it. But we want to build a plan that that retirement income can still utilize those retirement accounts over the long term, make sure those are invested properly, that we're not going to touch them until retirement, and then build the overall income plan with Social Security and any other sources of income that you might have. And really, again, it's, are you on track for financial independence?
Yeah, and I think that's the bottom line here for us, Damon. And remember, at the start of the show, I said all of our answers come from the perspective of trying to make sure you discover, protect, and share true financial independence. I know business owners, if they're going to be business owners, they've got to be risk takers. But from our perspective, Damon, it's good supplemental retirement income, but don't jeopardize your financial future, your financial independence, because you just, on a whim, decide you want to get into rental properties. It can be a good sidebar, but make sure you're on track with your assets, your contribution rate, your income. Make sure that's set, and then do this as an addition. Thanks for the question. Our final one of the day. Matt from Jonesboro. What if I plan on retiring now before the year on my target date fund? Is it okay to keep it more aggressively invested if I have some cash saved up? Matt thinks, I think it's okay, possibly. Don't know how aggressively you're invested. We don't know the number on that target date fund, but I do sense a little too granular of a focus on the year on your target date fund. And before we answer your question, Matt, I do want to kind of, for the audience, describe what that is. So the target date funds over the last decade or so, 15 years, have become really popular inside of employer-sponsored plans like 401ks because they're making things easy. It's the simple button for sure. A number is attached to the name of the fund. So if you're in the 2050 fund, that's the year of anticipated retirement from the fund's perspective. So if it's 2050, that's still a long ways off. It's going to be more aggressively invested from an asset allocation perspective. So it's probably going to be mostly equity. The percentage would depend on the fund, but probably 85, 90% equity. If you were in a 2040 fund, you're going to have a little less equity, a little more fixed income. If you're in a 2030 fund, you're catching the drift, right? And as you get closer to those years, once you're invested in the 2050 fund, if you're still in it in 2030, it's going to be ratcheting down on a glide path the amount of asset allocation it has to equities. So that's the way it works. And Matt's here basically suggesting, Tim, that he's got a target date fund that's pretty aggressive, even though he's getting ready to retire. So what should he do?
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. And actually, if that's the only fund you have in your plan that you're invested in, well, there might be something wrong with that. Because again, as we near retirement, we do need to make some changes. The problem with the glide path of maybe a 2025 fund or a 2030 fund is it is overly conservative, in meaning that there's going to be a lot more fixed income and a lot less equity in that bond portfolio, that you're actually in. So we know that you're going to retire maybe even in 2025 or 2030. Well, your retirement doesn't end there. Your retirement's going to be 20, 25, 30 years potentially. So we always need to have some growth aspect to our investments. So splitting your investments maybe between a couple of the different retirement date funds, if that's what you want to go with, just to make sure that you have maybe a more conservative fund on the front end for that money that you may need in the next 5 to 10 years, but then also a real growth aspect for something that you're not going to need for 20 or 25 years may be the way to go. So just because you have a 2025 or a 2030, 2040 fund, whatever it might be, and that may be your intended retirement date, just going in one may not be the right answer for you, but being able to retire in that year, we can definitely do that for you.
Yeah, and what are the chances that everything he has in retirement income sources is in this one plan, much less the one fund? We need a clearer picture of what are you going to be using for retirement income. Looking at former employer plans, are some of those old 401ks still out there? Do you have IRAs? Do you have Roth IRAs? Do you have a pension? Do you have non-retirement assets? What does Social Security look like? We want to incorporate all of your sources of retirement income and build an overall plan, and that will help us determine if some or all of what's in your 401k can be left in a more aggressive fund or if you need to tamp down the risk. And one of the other options, too, if he's going to retire soon, we don't know. I don't think he told us how old he was, did he? No, we didn't get an age. But one of the things, if you are still working and you're going to retire soon or even at retirement, to consider is, are you going to leave the money in the employer plan? Because if you're not going to leave it there, then leaving it in the 2050 fund or whatever target date fund you have is a little bit less important because you're going to be making a plan to roll it over. And that needs to be discussed with your financial advisor if you have one, but you basically have 4 options when either you have left an employer or you retire, or in many cases you reach the age 59 and a half. There are oftentimes eligible in-service distributions, but you have an option to leave the money in your employer plan, and you can certainly do that in retirement. You can roll the money into a new employer plan if you have a new job, which in this case is not applicable if you're going to retire. You can roll it to an IRA, which is a non-taxable event and opens up the investment universe in terms of other investment options for you and wouldn't restrict you to a target date fund. Or you can cash it out, which I would hardly ever recommend because you're going to incur taxes and potentially penalties. But those are things that need to be considered with a financial advisor building an overall retirement income plan, because I'm going to probably assume he's got more pieces to the puzzle here than just how much am I going to leave in my target date fund. So well, go ahead.
No, we hope that he has more pieces than just that.
Yes, for sure. You heard the bell there. We're almost out of time here. Time for our final thoughts.
I think mine goes back to the first question that we had and just the election. We do have a workshop on the elections coming up and kind of how that has historically impacted investments and so forth. But, you know, a lot of folks in the meeting rooms here lately, especially in the reviews, have been concerned about the election and who may be elected president. Again, we talked earlier about it's not really who is president, but what's the Congress look like as well. But, you know, if we're putting our hope and faith in just who the elected officials are, then we really have our focus in the wrong area. And it's really our economy and making sure that we're taking care of what we can at home for ourselves and making sure that we are doing that individually. And so a lot of that goes back to actually having someone on your side. And that's what we can do for you is, you know, you can set up that appointment, come in, visit with us, and we can help you make sure that you have a written plan. And so that's something we do all day, every day for our clients and something we'd love to do for you.
Yeah, so I'll drop kind of dovetail off of that. If you want to get started with the GenWealth Ready to Retire process and build your plan for financial independence, you can give us a call. 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526. And if you want to join us for the election workshop, It's coming up October 29th at the Chenal event venue at 6:30. You can register for free by going to getreadyforthefuture.com/academy. Reserve your seat there, and you'll also see a list of all of our upcoming workshops. We would love to see you soon at one of those events. And that is all the time we have for this week's Get Ready for the Future show. Some good questions. We want you to keep sending them to us. You can call or text them to us at 501-381-5228 or send us an email, show@getreadyforthefuture.com. We'll see you next time.
The Gen Wealth Financial Team is available to you 24/7 at info@getreadyforthefuture.com or call our offices at 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526. You should personally consult a financial advisor before making any investment, and no strategy can assure success. Securities offered through LPL Financial. Member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through Independent Advisor Alliance. Independent Advisor Alliance and Gen Wealth Financial Advisors are separate entities from LPL Financial.